Welcome to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. We believe life is about how we react. Thank you for tuning in today. We are glad you're here for another pretty powerful interview, pretty amazing conversation. But before we get into all of that, we have been working on what we have been referring to as a drug development series. So you can call it Drug Development 101, you can call it Drug Development series. I don't know. We haven't figured out what we're calling it yet, I guess.
Right.
But coming up in just a couple weeks, we're going to have some pretty amazing conversations with people in the industry that are, taking drugs to market, that are in the lab trying to come up with drugs, that are helping deal with the FDA. So we're going to touch on the main elements of developing a drug for diseases like ours and many others. In fact, I won't give you names. Part of our lineup includes some executives of some pretty big name companies. Yep. And I'm excited. So more on that coming soon. But for now, Kyle, what do we have today?
We have an incredible interview with Shelley Bowen, who is the Director of Family Services and Advocacy for the Barth Syndrome Foundation. But we really had a conversation with her about her family and some experiences that she's had in her life, and it turned out to be, like you said, very powerful, and we hope everybody enjoys it. We're going to start with a top 5, and Shelley chose to do her top 5 places. So here we go.
My top 5 places would be Island Grove, Florida. Tiny little town in Florida.
What makes Island Grove special?
My ancestors came to Florida when it was a territory, before it was even a state. And I love the way it smells. You can smell the rain coming in, and you can sense it. You can feel it. The orange blossoms, you can smell it in the air. And there's a history there. So for 6 generations, my family lived there. And I used to think, gosh, my ancestors would be so proud of how far we've come, right? We all think, gosh, how far we've come. And then we lived through the toilet paper shortage generation. And then we realized, it's like, yeah, little girl, come back when you really can say something. So I love it. I just love that place. It's just it's a little place in the world that nobody knows about, and it's just really very special.
Cool.
Anywhere there is a spring, and as in the aquifer in Florida. I grew up in Florida, so to me, it's just really beautiful when you can see water that's just steaming up from the ground and under the aquifer, nature's way of purifying itself. It's beautiful, and not just the glass bottom boats, but just being able to go kayaking and canoeing down a spring that just propels you. It's like really living. You're really sitting in nature. And then Indianapolis is there, and there's a reason for that too. And then home, wherever my home happens to be.
So
yes.
What is the reason for Indianapolis? That seems kind of random.
It does. Well, I went to fundraising school in Indianapolis, and it really transformed the way that I looked at what I do in the nonprofit world. Like, one of the greatest sayings I learned when I was there is that, there's the golden rule of do unto others as you would have done unto you. And when you work for a nonprofit, you have to ascribe by the platinum rule, which is to do unto others as they would like to have done unto them, which, not doing something because you think somebody needs something, but you've asked and you've assessed whether what you're doing is helpful or whether you're just doing something and staying busy, right? So, and it's a very philanthropic area, and I like I like the fact that everybody that I ever met in Indianapolis is just kind. I'm sure there's unkind people there, but I was really lucky, and I got to meet all the kind people that were there.
I think maybe you just attract kind people, perhaps.
I hope so. It's better. It's better than the other way, right?
Yeah.
And then home, and home is really wherever you're surrounded by the people you love, and what you make of it, and the smells in the house when you cook your favorite foods, and you have your favorite sounds and everything that surrounds you, home. And the 2 acres of land where I grew up, which was surrounded by cows. And I actually love the smell of cows. I love the smell of cows. I love the way the moon looks when it rises there. It's just it's a piece of the planet that I really loved.
You are definitely the first person I've met that says, I love the smell of cow. That's a first for me, and I'm going to point that out.
I'm glad. I guess when you're close to home, right?
Yep.
There's just that. Oh, we're close.
I don't know if anybody on the East Coast would know, but it shows up in TV shows and movies every now and then. But California has a place called Harris Ranch. It's right in the middle of the valley. You pass through it, like if you're driving San Francisco to LA or LA to Sacramento, you pass right by Harris Ranch. And I don't know the numbers, so I'm making this all up, but I'm going to assume it's like 200 or 300 acres, and they have 1 million cows. Like, it's just a huge cow farm for dairy and steak and beef, and I mean they do everything. So a huge, we call it beef cow rancher on the West Coast, and that's the worst part of the drive because when you for several miles you smell the activities that take place at this farm, and it's not usually something you look forward to.
I feel like if you live near there, that maybe that familiar smell might, take on a different,
like a reassuring kind of smell
or
odor. Yeah. All right. Fair.
I'm not saying like the cow manure I like the smell of, but there's like puppy, right? A puppy has an aroma.
So a shout out to Indianapolis. I've never been, but how cool is it to think of a city, you had one really good week there or whatever it was, and now you love that city. So, I used to think that way of your town, Kyle, because it was fun the first time, but then the second time, I was stuck in a rehab hospital.
Oh, that's true.
But man, how incredible. To me, just listening to her talk, she was incredibly heartfelt, right? It was just, she didn't share about Disneyland and her favorite restaurant spot. She dug deep, I felt, and talked about some areas that really meant a lot to her, and she was so fun to talk to, even though I think it's weird that she loves cows. It was definitely a very sincere offering of favorite places.
Yeah, and that top 5 is just a taste, because really, I feel like she talks like that about everything, right? I think she just brings her heart and soul to all the topics. And so we first met Shelley because of the Bart Syndrome Foundation, and we were connected to them through some work we were going to do together. So we sent her a 2021 calendar at the end of the year, at the end of 2020, and she sent back some pictures of her brother looking at the calendar, and she told us a little bit about how much they appreciated it. So that's why we asked her on to talk about her experiences with her brother and her family. And
she emailed us, right, talking about that calendar and what it meant to them. That was just one little paragraph, but then there was an email exchange that probably went on for, I don't know, 7 or 8 emails, right? An incredible dialogue that just unfolded so much of her story, which is what we're about to play. So here it is.
My little brother, who is not so little anymore, he's much taller, but he says I will always be his big sister. So I had one brother, Jeffrey, and Jeffrey was Jeffrey was, my parents both worked a job, and I always, I was like Jeffrey's caregiver, and then we always were very, very close. And I saw, my brother grow up with special needs and being picked on and being different. And I became very protective of him and realized just how cruel the world can be to people who are different. And so Jeffrey and I are extremely close. He's much kinder than I am. He really is. He sees the good in people. It's like he can't, there's something just really, I don't know, there's just something superb about my little brother, who's, by the way, 6 foot tall. So I grew up with Jeffrey, and then I left South Carolina and the cows in 1979, and then moved to Florida, and I had a daughter, Alana has Turner syndrome. And then I had 2 boys that had Barth syndrome, and both of the boys passed away, and they were wonderful, wonderful kids. Evan died when he was 4, and Michael died when he was 23. And Michael was a good man. He was, one of my favorite sayings is, "Moments are better than nevers," and I'm so thankful that I had the moments that I had with them, and that I got to spend the time that I had. Because had I not had them, I wouldn't be who I am. But anyway, I moved back to South Carolina, and my dad had Parkinson's, and my mom was really struggling. She was living in the country. She didn't like the 2 acres of land. She preferred the city. And I came back and I bought an old house that I always loved. That when I used to ride by this house when I was a little girl, I said, one of these days I'm going to have a house just like that. And as it turns out, I have the house that was just like that. So I bought the house, fixed it up. So then I came back, and I'm, to help my mom with my dad and Jeff too. He was going through a pretty difficult time at that time, and so here I am. South Carolina.
So you're back in South Carolina, and one of the things that connected us to the story that we're going to share a little bit today is the calendar we sent you for the year. You had shared that with your brother. Can you talk a little bit more about your brother and maybe the situation he's in, and maybe the impact the last year has had on you two?
If you haven't picked up on it, our family's pretty tactile, right? We we sense things. There's something very tactile about getting a calendar that is with paper, especially for Jeffrey. He gets a calendar. It's very important to him to have a calendar that he can flip. I don't know. It's really interesting because it's like that's over, and he flips it, and then it's something that he can look forward to, and he marks things. He, in fact, he was in a Sunday school. He kept a listing of every prayer request that anybody ever had for 10 years and wrote it down. Wow. And he's good like that. But one of the things that was missing was his when I'm going to go home calendar. So everything shut down. The last time I saw Jeffrey was around his birthday. We went to see Cirque du Soleil for his birthday. We went out to eat and met with, it was his birthday week. We met with a friend of mine and said, okay, we're going to get together. We're going to do this next week. And then everything changed. Everything changed for the world. The difference is that with Jeffrey, I had no control. I had zero control. He was living in a group home. And in order to protect him and the other residents in the home where he lived, he was not allowed to come home. If I took him out, I would have to take him out forever, And so would I compromise what was good for then based on what was good for long term, but then long term got longer and longer and longer. And it was really hard. And he didn't, by seeing the calendar that you sent, which you probably never knew it would make such an impact, it was highlighted when he would come home, and he knew, I am coming home then. Mm-hmm. I will be home then. It was like an end. It was tangible. It was, I can come home. It's not just this thing someday soon. It was highlighted, and it was on the calendar. And it was important, it was important to some people. It may have been a small thing, but it was really big for Jeff.
How long was it that you guys couldn't see each other during the pandemic?
That was in February of last year. And then I was able to go and visit with him, but I had to visit in the driveway with, being fully masked. I couldn't go into his home or anything. And there were a couple of visits that we could have, and then it was October before I could bring him home again.
Wow.
And of course we could see each other on the phone, but I got him a smartphone, and it was really hard for him to, figure it out. But he did. He actually figured it out. But to actually hug him and touch him, I miss being able to see him and talk to him. And the resonance of a person's voice is different when you're with them than when you're on the phone. And it was a really happy day. It was a really happy day to be able to see him.
One thing I wanted to ask you about, Shelley, earlier you talked a little bit about your parents, and in our email exchanges leading up to this phone call, you had shared a particular story about your dad before he had passed away, and his heaviness for his son, Jeff. Can you talk a little bit about some of the things that were shared and how that played out?
So we knew, as I said earlier, we knew Jeffrey had issues, and he, it was really hard to see, the things Jeffrey went through. I mean, really, really, what he went through in his life is just the cruelty that, he went through made my dad very protective of him. Because, people can be really mean, and people can allow their children to be very cruel as well. And so Dad and my mom had a burden for what would happen to him. And it was really, they one of the things about being a sister of somebody with a chronic illness or a disability is that you are involved. You care about what is going on, and everybody tries. We always try to avoid a conversation because we don't want somebody to worry about something, or we don't talk about it because we don't want somebody to worry about it. And the truth of the matter is that it's there. It is there. So, to talk about it is just an important thing to discuss. And with Jeff, I saw Jeffrey being protected, and that really wasn't what, nobody asked him if that was what he wanted. Nobody asked him, what do you want? Nobody, I was seeing him live on this 2 acres of land that I loved, but it was his prison. It was his prison. And so before my my mom died, Jeffrey broke down completely. I mean, we thought we had lost him completely for good. He had he just went into this place in his mind that was really very, I don't know where he went, but I knew he was gone. We knew he was gone and we couldn't reach him. And thankfully he had a doctor who realized that a diagnosis mattered and they needed to get to the bottom of it. And Jeff, after months came out of it. And as it would turn out, there was a place at this home in United Cerebral Palsy Foundation of South Carolina, and Jeffrey could be placed there. And he thrived. He was able to volunteer. He was able to do things. He was able to go out and do Meals on Wheels. He was able to work with his personal trainer. And my mom had this piece of seeing him thrive, the one thing that they were very, always very concerned about. My mom died first, and then my dad, because she died very suddenly, and my dad passed away in 2018, and there is no such thing as a good death. I've just, I've seen enough of it, and with Daddy, he knew that his moments were few. The last thing he said was, and it was in a lot of pain, and he said, "Shelley, I want you and Jeffrey to stick together. Just promise me that you'll stick together." And that was literally his last request, knowing that would be his last. Those would be his last words.
How does it feel to live out your dad's wishes in the way that you do?
Ultimately, my responsibility is to live with myself and know that I've done what I know is right, and to honor my brother who's alive. My dad, I wanted my dad to know with a certainty that everything would be okay. You can die in peace. You can know that you have my promise that he's going to be okay. And he needed that. I think he knew, but he needed that. But I think what I'm most grateful for, and I think you got to look at that, what are you grateful for? I think what I'm really grateful for is that my mom and my dad had the opportunity to see my brother thrive, to see him say, "I am an individual." Literally say, "I am an individual, and people should not treat individuals like this," and to take up for himself. And to, just see his personality. He's really funny. I mean, he's really, because he sees things like so clearly, and, to see Jeffrey really, I don't know, get to be the person he needed to be, but he was in his 40s. Most of us get to have some sense of independence when we're growing up, along the way, and he is able to experience life independent of his family, and he's now 50. I think I'm really grateful for that.
So you've made several references to the really difficult things in your brother's life, and I certainly don't want you to go there if you don't want to, and that's totally fine. But I think it would be helpful to understand some of that. I think it would be a wonderful perspective to know what you mean by some of the difficulties that your brother had to go through, if that's okay.
It's okay because I don't tolerate it, so I guess now I have some control as an adult, right? You live 18 years rebelling, and you spend the next 18 trying to make up for it, and then now I can do what I want to do. But I don't like anything that says that somebody is retarded in terms of a delay or not the way they should be. I mean, the word retarded is, it's a word, but it's become, dirty and an insult. And in many ways, Jeffrey's advanced. He is advanced in the way he sees things. He's advanced in the fact that he doesn't, it's almost like he doesn't have the capacity to lie. I'll take that. I'll take being that way any day,
Yeah.
and sarcasm is, wasted on him, and it's just like, those are, the words, but he knew those words weren't kind. I think for me, the worst day was, Jeffrey would get paddlings for his behavior in school because corporal punishment, was, I guess, hitting a child is how you control them. And, he would get paddlings at school, and because he was struggling. And the worst day was when, a child, he was in middle school, and he was being jeered that morning, and I dropped him off, and I said, of course, I'm not as nice as Jeffrey. I'm like, who are those jerks? Who are those people? And he says, they're my friends. I said, no, they're not your friends. They're jerks. He says, they just don't know me. And, the fact that he would walk by them and they called him, hey, hey, retard, or whatever it was that they said to him. And then he waved at them. He waved at them. I mean, most of us would just, he waved at them. I mean, it just, I could still remember seeing that and thinking, gosh, again, I could be a better person by being just a little bit like that. But then that afternoon, I came to pick him up, and he didn't come out to the car. And what had happened is that somebody had taken his pants away from him and left him in the bathroom by himself. And he knew he could not walk. He knew he couldn't come out in the hallway, And so I went and found him, and we got him, I got him some pants, and then I wasn't 18 yet, so we found the people who did it to him, and they never picked on him again. They never did it again. But there were other instances like that. So people and turning your eye to it and say kids will be kids, that's not okay.
Right.
Sure.
It's not okay for kids to accept cruelty regardless of how old you are.
Yeah, those kids will eventually be adults. And if it's never addressed, it will never change.
That's right.
Shelley, I really appreciate you sharing, because one of the things you said is, if we just talk about it like that's part of solving some of this stuff, or at least changing it in our own minds, and addressing it with those kids. And I think that's one of the principles of this podcast, that me and Sean sat down together and said, you know what, if we just talk about some of these issues in our lives, they don't have such negative power over us. And so I really appreciate you sharing those tough things that your brother went through.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. This is a great way to spend part of my Rare Disease Day with you guys. I even dressed up for you with my Rare Disease Day shirt.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, Shelley, I will say, I feel like this is one of my favorite conversations so far, because it just feels so organic to me, right? You just shared a story. There was no real agenda. Our conversation is just catching up on life and just sharing about how we all just support each other in our daily walk. So I enjoyed the conversation because we're just simply talking about life, and life in the manner of working through our circumstances, right? Whether they're yours on behalf of your brother, or they're your brothers or your parents. I really enjoyed just being able to sit on the phone with you and talk about how we get through a day. So I'm honored that you took a bit of time on your Sunday afternoon to chat with us.
I love your podcast. So this is like being on the Johnny Carson show for me, of course. So I appreciate you inviting me to come and have a conversation with you.
So, Shelley, on our website, we're going to share those pictures of your brother Jeff because they're really touching, a couple of those pictures, and I want our listeners to see he's a handsome man. So, I mean, I'm not ashamed to say that.
He is a handsome man, and I asked him, he really wanted to be here. And I said, he's also a man of few words until he gets to know you. And I said, I'm going to be talking with my friends who sent the calendar. And, unfortunately, you're not able to be there. I said, is there anything you want me to say? And he said, yes, tell them thank you.
Nice.
Thank you.
Well, Shelley, thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate you having a conversation with us and being open about life for you and your brother and your family. I'm grateful and look forward to meeting you someday and being able to meet Jeffrey as well.
Thank you for having me.
Man, I really, really value our conversation with Shelley. It's so heartbreaking to hear the stories about her brother, her kids, and her parents. She has every right to be a bitter and angry person. But it's like the opposite of who she is. And I think that's just really remarkable.
And you can hear that in her voice, right? Sure, there's been a lot of heartbreak in her life, but she isn't bitter. She isn't mad at the world. She's just taking it one day at a time. And I love how she put it into perfect words, in my opinion. Her moments are better than nevers, which is true for all of us, right? So, I'm sure heartbreaking that her baby died at 4, and then her other child died at I forget now, but
23 or something. Yeah,
23. It's tough, no matter what. You're right. When you lose a child, it doesn't matter how old they are. But to be so incredibly grateful for a couple years, couple hours, couple days, whatever it may be. I mean, speaking about her style and her approach and personality, I picture myself when the day comes where we can meet.
Yeah.
I feel like her old house that she speaks of, I have no idea. I've never seen it or pictures or anything, but I picture it having like one of those big wraparound porches.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I can just see us sitting down in rocking chairs, sipping some iced tea, and talking for hours about life.
Just looking off into the sunset or the horizon.
Yeah, exactly. It just seems like she's the perfect soul for that kind of experience. And it's great because her attitude of gratefulness and that mindset sets us up, right? To end this episode with our normal practice, our thank you notes for today. Kyle, who are you saying thank you to today?
Alan Farmer came over and he helped me install a little bracket on my wall so I can hang my trike so it's not just sitting around the floor taking a broom. And so far I've thanked Jen Farmer and Garrett Farmer. Now Alan Farmer. Now I gotta hang out with Luke a little more so I can establish my gratitude for him because it's certainly there. I just need to establish a specific thing.
There's one more farmer to include in the list. Well, that's great. And if you don't have a trike or you haven't really seen one, it's surprising how much room those things take up. When you see it at the bike shop, no big deal. But man, when it's sitting in the corner of your living room, they're like 7 feet long, from wheel to pedal or whatever.
Right.
So I'm sure that saves a lot of room. I'm going to say thank you to a coworker, a friend of mine. His name is Jeremy. Jeremy is one of those old souls. He's not old by any means. He's like maybe a year or two older than me, but he's just got that persona that he's lived forever. Nothing bothers him. He understands the world. He's incredibly patient with people. And what sticks out to me lately with Jeremy is, with my recent injuries and last year's injuries, our office is up a flight of stairs, no elevator. It's not a public space. So we've had to use a temporary office space for me downstairs. And I often have to carry stuff up and down or, deliver stuff up or bring it down. And Jeremy is one of the first people to make his hands full, take as much as he can and take it upstairs or down the stairs. And just, he's a helper kind of a person.
Yeah.
Incredible.
Not such huge things, right? But just like helpful, constantly. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's even the dumbest things. Like, hey,
You're
can
right.
you bring me a paper clip? I need a paper clip. He'll bring me a paper. I've never asked for that, but, he's that kind of
Right.
Okay, sure, I'm right on it.
Yeah.
Without any sort of, bro, you kidding me? He just does it. And I'm grateful that I can rely on him, and I know if I need something, he'll do it.
Yep.
So, with that, we trust that you enjoyed the conversation with Shelley. We'll encourage you to check out the show notes. You can go look into a little bit more of the Barth Syndrome Foundation where Shelley works and has dedicated her life. If you're enjoying this show, we ask you to share and subscribe. Continue telling your friends about us. We look forward to chatting with you soon, especially when it comes to our drug development series. But until next time,
Keep living with urgency. Thank you for listening to the Two Disabled Dudes podcast. This show is possible with your support. Visit twodisableddudes.com to donate.
connect with us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app.